Hello, welcome to a Gamasutra video interview. Today I'm talking to the guys from Lazy 8 Studios, Rob Jagnow? Yeah, that's right. Rob Jagnow and Brendan Mauro. Did I get those right? I think
That's
I did,
good.
yeah.
We're happy to be here.
Yes, I'm doing really bad with surnames at the moment. So these guys have been working on this game that you can see just next to our lovely faces, called Extrasolar, which is a browser. Actually, I should let you guys describe the game. What is this? What are people looking at?
It's tough. Even though I have given this elevator pitch literally hundreds of times,
Mm,
it is a very hard game to describe. It is a browser game that looks very much like an alternate reality game, if you are familiar with the genre,
yeah.
except that it's really not like an alternate reality game. It's basically this game that blurs the line between fantasy and reality and allows you to play through this kind of living story, interacting with virtual characters as if they're real people, for in a process that takes most people about 2 months to get through what we're considering season one of the story content.
Hmm.
Um, it's very graphics rich, but you can still play it all over the kind of like dumbest of dumb browsers because all of the rendering is done in the cloud. So it's basically a completely new game space.
Yeah. So for people looking at this, what they're essentially seeing is the player is a sort of a volunteer who is controlling these bots that are on a planet, and as they move around on the map, then they're taking photos. So one of the really interesting things I found about this, the photos, how exactly then are these being generated? So someone moves a bot, it takes a photo, and what is the photo that they are seeing?
Right. So within the fiction of the game, basically we're saying that you're telling your rover where to go, what time of day you want to take the photo at, what direction you want that photo to be in, whether you want the flash on, do you want a 360-degree panorama photo, all these parameters for your photo. And then hours later, you get this gorgeous photo of the surface of the planet, and there's life, and you're tagging and identifying species, and kind of tagging other mysterious things that you find on this island. In this case, the photo that you're looking at, it's loading right now, is
Yeah.
the landing pod that you arrived in. Um, but behind the scenes, what's happening is you basically, when you specify the coordinates of where you want your photo, that all gets uploaded to a server that we have in the cloud, and we sort of put your virtual rover in this virtual space that has this rich island with thousands, tens of thousands of alien species, and we draw an image from that location, save it to a hard drive, and then hours later that gets served up to you. So you're really, we really wanted to give the impression that you were exploring this planet much like NASA does with Mars, where you're really
Hmm.
exploring one photo at a time, with the difference being that there's a lot more interesting stuff than on Mars.
Yeah, because I mean, I think one of the things that I've found really cool is how it, like, all the photos are very much unique to me. So it's
Yeah.
not just where I'm stopping my lander, it's what time of the day I'm stopping my lander, what kind of photo I'm taking, all that kind of stuff, essentially.
And the weather is constantly changing. There are 4 different parameters that are changing with the cloud. There are 2 lunar cycles, so you have the major moon and the minor moon. I think they have approximately a 30-day and a 60-day lunar cycle. So the conditions that you're seeing on the planet are changing constantly. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and then, of course, we've got sort of emails coming in over here. We've got these sort of tasks, which I guess are like mission-based things. Um, and the quite interesting thing about this is that when I'm actually moving my rover around, I'm moving it. I choose where I want it to go, and then essentially I can set when I want it to arrive, and the minimum amount of time is an hour in real time,
Yeah.
which I guess people are going to sort of compare it to all these sort of, free to play energy style games that are coming out where it says, oh, you can't play, for another hour until you've got more energy. But actually it's not really like that at all. It's sort of actually part of the story.
Yeah, it's really part of the story, and there are sort of standard ways to design games around energy. This is a really common thing in the freemium game model, where oftentimes like you have the option to grind and do something that's time intensive or very very labor intensive to sort of earn more energy, or you can pay. And we really don't like that model. We're honestly doing this because it creates a really rich, excellent fiction. And so in this game, there is no grind, and it's funny. Like when players start to play, you can play for about 30 minutes, and go through a tutorial, and you kind of get acquainted with the characters, and you take your first photo, and then you have to wait. Like if you're an unpaid player, you have to wait a minimum of 4 hours before you can do anything. And it's players are like, but I want more. I want to do this right now. And it's a little frustrating when you first get started, but once players really get into the system and really kind of get a feel for it, they really appreciate this, that the game is very respectful of your time. And in the same way that when you're writing a movie script, you're never supposed to write like a line of dialogue that doesn't advance the story. We want everything that you do within the game to advance the story. We try to keep the events densely spaced through the environment so that you're always discovering something new. And we really want this to be a game that's very respectful of your time.
Okay, we just had a little Skype crash, so we're going to jump back into this now. That's a bit annoying.
Yay,
Okay,
love-hate relationship with technology.
Woo! Well done, Skype. Well done. So what I was just saying before Skype crash was that I like how the sort of way that you're forced to wait these hours. At first, it felt a bit like, oh, it's stopping me playing. Why is it doing this? But actually, then it worked twofold, really. Firstly, it fit in with my work really well. I was feeling like, it's in my browser, I'm just doing some work, and then I jump over and, oh yeah, I've got new photos, I can check all these things out, so I'll keep jumping to it. But also, it felt like it fit the story as well. Like if the rover just went boom like that and it was there, that would just feel a bit silly. But because it actually feels, I mean, it genuinely feels like there is a rover somewhere on a planet, as weird as that sounds, actually somewhere going around this planet for me, which is sort of cool, really.
Yeah, and as we've grown the game, we've gotten to the point where we can kind of overcome some of those technical constraints, where we could make it so that we could create a business model where you can pay and have basically play instantly through the whole game. Mm-hmm. But we don't want you to pay and then have a worse experience. And the reality is, one of the things that's really great about this game is that it feels like it becomes part of your life. And we watch people play, and they just kind of leave their browser open. They check in the morning, they check in at lunch, and they check in after work, and they check in after they go to bed, or just before they go to bed. And it just becomes part of their life, but it's not demanding. It only takes a few minutes to kind of peek in and see what your new tasks are and what your new messages are. It's like reading one page of a story every 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
It's been really interesting to see who the game appeals to. There are a lot of people who, especially friends and family, who said, so we're beta testing right now. It's in a closed beta. We have about 700 testers. And a lot of people, when they came on board, they said, oh, well, I don't really have time to play games. And we sort of say, well, then this is the perfect game for you. It's a game that's very respectful of your time. And they're like, oh, well, games aren't really my thing, but I'll try. And, a week later, they're really into it. And so it's been great to see the game really reaching an audience who consider themselves non-gamers. In some ways, it's a very hardcore game. It's a very deep, complicated story, but we're still managing to hit people who normally would not consider themselves gamers.
Well, because I was going to say to you, like, in a way, I sort of calling it a game actually feels weird because, I mean, it's not like other games that I play. That doesn't mean it's not a game or anything. But if someone was to actually ask me to describe it, I don't think I would use the word game. I think I'd more sort of call it sort of an interactive story that you sort of play along with, really. Which I mean, how do you guys use the word game to describe it?
We honestly kind of like to avoid the word game. I think you're right. Interactive story is kind of what feels like a better description for it. And it's the game itself has a very unusual evolutionary path, and the team has an unusual evolutionary path. I am not really from the game industry. I cut my teeth at Pixar, And, I spent 2 summers working there. I have a PhD in computer graphics. So I'm really like a graphics guy and a rendering guy and not really a game guy. And because of that, I think that the assumptions that I have about games are really different. Or maybe I should say I'm unencumbered by a lot of the assumptions about what a game is supposed to be and how it's supposed to be played. So after Brendan and I finished Cogs, which was a fairly successful game, we spent a year marketing it and porting it to other platforms, and we basically found ourselves with a budget to kind of really do something experimental and make the game that we wanted to make. And we were tossing around a bunch of ideas. And one day I'm walking to the gym, and I kind of like just had this idea in my head, like, I really want to bring beautiful rendering to the web, to like an audience that's never seen this kind of rendering before. And I immediately was like, well, if I did that, it would have to be rendering in the cloud. What kind of game would you make where you can only see like one image every few hours? And immediately it was like space exploration. Space exploration works for this. So I pitched this idea to Brendan, and he was like, drop everything. That is the game that I want to work on. And so we kind of made a really, really crappy prototype.
Well, at that point we were like, no, there's no way we're going to make this game because it's going to be a huge amount of work and totally experimental. And we have no idea if it's going to be successful financially or if we're even able to do it. So we're like, well, let's make a prototype and just see how hard it is.
Yeah. And I had never even heard of alternate reality games at that time. And so I kind of pitched this to some friends, and they were like, oh, well, you need to learn about alternate reality games. And so we made this prototype, and it was really surprisingly compelling. Just moving around and taking pictures was kind of this really compelling thing. And the more we played with it, the more we added a little bit of light story and then a little bit more story. And originally, it was going to be kind of more like a massively multiplayer thing where everybody's, participating in the same world and sharing exploration. But the more we added story and the more that we made you as the player a central character in the narrative that was happening, the more we scaled back the social aspects and added more and more story and just really focused on kind of what we thought was the gem of the game. And ended up with this, and in the end, it's about 200 pages of written content that form the story that plays out over video messages, voicemail messages, PDF files, images, voicemail files, websites, all distributed all over the place. But it's really a pretty substantial story.
Yeah, I mean, when it actually came to the story, like, how were you purposely, with all those things you're talking about, video and linking to websites, etc., were you purposely trying to explore things that haven't been done in games, in stories before, or were these just ideas that were in your head anyway?
Well, the good news is, at least with alternate reality games, there was sort of a precedent for what can be done. So things that we considered that we haven't done were things like telephones, like live action stuff in physical locations. So we took this huge array of areas where stories could be told and kind of narrowed that down to the place where it works to sort of play at your own pace and can all be done through the internet. Which just it allows you to play from any location. Basically, if you have a browser, you can play. So that's kind of what it became. We learned a lot from alternate reality games. So generally, especially for the audience who's watching who isn't familiar with alternate reality games, usually the game launches, everyone plays at the same time and at the same pace. And you have these really complicated puzzles that are solved by a community. There are oftentimes physical locations and events that are involved. And when it's over, it's over. And that's really compelling. Like, it gives you an amazing emotional experience of living a game and living in this world that feels very real. The problem with that is that it's not replayable. Everybody needs to play at the same pace. It's oftentimes very demanding of your time. And so when we designed Extrasolar, we wanted to get around those hurdles. How can we make that same emotional experience of being a character in a story, but make it so that you can play at your own pace, casually, that all the puzzles can be solved by a single person, and you can start at any time.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously with the story as well, you yourself are one of the the main character, I would say. Actually, let's see if I can just play like 10 seconds of this, just so this is the kind of video that you get in the
Welcome
emails,
to Extrasolar, the groundbreaking crowdsourced exploration program from the Exoplanetary Research Institute. I'm Dr.
Very cool.
Robert Turing.
It sort of reminds me of,
Scientist for
I'll turn it down a little bit.
liaison
It sort of reminds me a little bit of Lost. Was there a little bit of that? I don't know. Have you seen Lost?
We studied Lost because
Yeah.
it has a web alternate reality game component.
Mhm.
And it's been funny. I recently saw Rand Miller, who was the guy who founded Cyan Studios and did Myst, and they did a postmortem on that game. I guess it's 25 years later. And it was really fascinating to see. He was another person. He starred as a character in video in his own game, and I had never made that connection before. It's using live video in games is like, it's been done before, but it hasn't been done in like the last 10 years. So people thought this was really strange and surprising. It's funny, when I pitched this game to people, even when I made it clear that this was supposed to be, you're interacting with virtual characters, we want it to really look like a real space exploration expedition. Some of the questions that I got were really strange. One of them was, "Oh, isn't rendering all those cutscenes going to be expensive?" And it really shows like the frame of mind the game developers are in today. Like, people, like when I said, "Oh, we'll use live actors," they were like, "That's just crazy talk." The other common question that I got, and this still blows my mind, people said, "Well, how do I kill the other rovers? Like, how do I destroy the other rovers on the planet?" And, again, it's like we're so burdened sometimes by the assumptions about what a game is and what a game is supposed to be, that, people really thought, they're surely they're aliens. There's going to be death because there's going to be killing. And it really took people a while to understand, like, no, when we say this is going to be like a real space exploration expedition, like, that's what we mean. This is going to be like a NASA expedition. So it's been a really interesting journey. It's a really unusual design path.
Yeah. What I want to do is jump all the way back to one of my first questions and sort of branch from there. The whole sort of comparison with the sort of free to play energy model, because for people watching, the idea behind the game, and you might have to correct me on this if I'm wrong, so the idea is that you can play as a volunteer for free, and the restrictions are that you have to wait a 4-hour minimum between photos, and then there's also sort of, for infrared, you can only do 5 infrared photos and only 3 panorama video photos. If you become an associate, which is what I have, it's you can do any type of photos and you only have to wait an hour. And then there's this pioneer as well, which I assume means that you get all of the future episodes as well.
Basically, the plan is to do 3 seasons of content. We have 1 done so far, and Pioneer means you get all 3.
So the obvious question, I guess, really is why you've sort of gone against the grain of microtransactions, because if you were talking to somebody right now, one of these sort of free-to-play nuts, they would be pointing at your game and shaking their head and saying, "No, this is all wrong. Remove these numbers here. Make it so that you pay like $1 for a day's worth of being able to take a photo every hour," and yada yada yada. Essentially telling you that you should be making it so there are infinite numbers of in-app purchases. I mean, why aren't there? Why is it that you've decided to essentially? Because it's not really free to play, is it? This is, I would probably call this more like a demo, really, in that you get part of the game, and if you pay money, then you get the rest of the game.
Or like shareware, like old Doom style, where you
exactly.
play through the first part of the game for free and then pay for the other.
I mean, what? So why have you not done that?
Because we hate it.
Because we hate it. These are great questions, and we get this a lot. I mean, we have had hundreds of hours of design meetings with the team here, deciding how we're going to do, what's our primary business model. If that fails, what is going to be our alternative business model? And you're right. I think that freemium doesn't really describe the game very well. It's really more ridiculously generous demo. And the reason we need to do a ridiculously generous demo is basically because the game is so weird and so different. First of all, you can't ask anybody to pay up front for it because you really don't know what you're getting. And anyone who's actually been through the start of the story, like there would be moments when you weren't quite sure what was going on, when you would be really upset because, at the risk of giving a little bit of a minor spoiler, there's some rejection that goes on at the beginning of this story. Mm-hmm. And so if you paid up front, like that was clearly out. But that it's true. The game still lends itself to microtransactions. So we could have still said, ridiculously generous demo, but when you do pay, you pay in small amounts. And we went with this model, like you pay $9.50 once and you're done. Partly because we just feel like it's a less abusive, more easily understandable, more generous model. And it's just, we really like it. And the number of players who are paying, it's a little bit deceptive because the people that we in our beta are a lot of game developers, a lot of friends and family, but about 15% of people are choosing to pay to have that, to remove the restriction on your minimum time, which is enough to make the game financially viable. So we really think, if the game isn't financially viable, we would consider a microtransaction model, but really we just like this better. It just feels a lot friendlier. Simple as that.
That's fair enough. I'm not complaining. So, what else was I? Oh, of course, I was going to ask about the sort of having it on mobile, because I've actually sort of stuck a link to it on my Android, and well, as I've talked to you before, it works fairly well on mobile. It's all sort of, you can access it all. It's not optimized,
right?
But is there a plan there to make a mobile optimized version?
Yeah, our client-side developer Keith Jerkowski has been doing a lot of work getting IE8 support working and also getting mobile browser support working. So it's everything at this point should work on mobile, but it's a little clunky. Yeah. Tablets are pretty good, actually. It's actually a pretty good experience on a tablet, but on the phone, we're really working on doing we're experimenting with some custom interfaces so that this dashboard here that you see right now, which is kind of this crowded space, it'll be more linear, so you can kind of scroll down and see everything in a more phone-friendly way. Yeah. And we know people are playing on phones, so we really want to do that. It's a little bit sad because the images are so rich and so high resolution. It's really definitely best as a desktop experience. But we're definitely committed to making the phone experience be better.
Cool. So so what's the plan then? So the game is currently in beta. It's not in open beta right now, is it?
Right, closed beta, so about 700 testers, and the feedback has been amazing. The forums have just lighted up with ideas and bug reports, and so we're addressing that as much as we can. And I'm hoping that around the end of January is when we're going to open everything up, and then kind of hopefully grow in a fairly viral way. It may still be a technically closed beta, but we might do a Gmail style where we give everyone who is currently participating a number of invitations so that they can bring in their friends, just to kind of like help us scale up slowly. But we're finally, only recently, we kind of have all the hardware in place where we can, finding the rendering hardware in the cloud was really a challenging thing to do. So we finally have that hardware in place and we're ready to kind of grow up to 1 million customers, hopefully.
Excellent. And then what's the plan with the future then? So I'm guessing you guys are sort of working on episode 2 at the moment?
Yeah, we're just starting work on episode 2. And really, the very start was, well, we're just going to release episode 1 or season 1 content as we call it, and just see if this game can be financially viable at all, which honestly, up until about a month ago, we had no idea if there was any possibility that this game could be financially viable. There have been a ton of challenges. For one thing, up until a few weeks ago, there simply was not affordable on-demand rendering hardware in the cloud. And we kind of estimated how prices would drop for instances in the cloud, and it hadn't been holding true. It was still up until this threshold, it was still $2.10 an hour to host a server in the cloud, which you can imagine you need a lot of paying players to support that.
Yeah.
And then overnight, it dropped to 65 cents an hour. And so finally, we have what looks to be like a cost-effective, viable way to scale up.
Good timing.
So finally, it's, for a while there, it was looking like we were probably actually going to buy our own hardware and build out our own hardware farm. So I'm really glad that we're not going to have to do that, because I didn't want to start a company just for that. So yeah, I think we finally the major hurdles are done, and we're ready to grow. So it's just a matter of polish, and at some point we'll reach a threshold where we're going to say things are, we're at the 99% point, and it's ready to launch.
Excellent. Right. Well, there we go. That is Extrasolar. So January, you say, will be the time when people.
That's when we're targeting. I mean, we know that's a little ambitious, particularly since December isn't really a productive month for anybody.
No.
So it's ambitious, but you've played the game all the way through at this point, so the game is done.
Yeah.
There's just little things here and there. As with our last game, Cogs, we basically we insist on a super high quality level, so we're just kind of going crazy and trying to get everything as perfect as possible. But at some point, we just have to say, push our baby out the door and say, okay, ready to be experienced.
Yeah, excellent. Right, well, anybody who's watching this, you do need to play this. I can tell you this for sure. So you should probably watch out for it in January/February, should we say? That sounds
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah. Thanks very much for talking to me.
So,
And we're definitely going to have to catch up again, sort of when a lot of people have started playing it, and we can talk more about the story stuff, because obviously we've not really been able to talk about that because it would just be massive spoiler alerts all the way through.
Yeah, it's very spoiler heavy. I should say, Brendan's reminding me that we are bringing in batches of beta testers on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
So the best way to get signed up is to go to exoresearch.com, exoresearch.com, and we have a place where you can sign up for a mailing list there, and that's where we've been. We'll bring in another 100 people at a time for testers.
Okay.
So that's, if you want early access, that's your best bet.
Okay, so everyone should go and do that then. That would be the next best thing to do after watching this video. Right, excellent. Well, yeah, thanks again for talking to me, and I look forward to seeing how the game progresses in the future.
Thanks for the interview.
Okay, see ya.
Take care.
Bye.